So our question for the evening in the classroom is, what is self-defense, right? Okay, there's our little black and white chalkboard, right? So if we were in the classroom, we would ask, what is self-defense? So very clearly, it should be pretty self-explanatory, right? Self-defense, self-explanatory. But within the context of the polis, for some reason, I don't know why, it's almost as if people intentionally do it or they just don't grasp it. They don't grasp reality, but they often miss the boat when it comes to the definition of self-defense. So for the paid subscribers, you'll be able to see this. And of course, this will be on video and people can stop it and pause it and things like that. But inside the news notes, I went through some of the things that we would discuss just briefly in class before we started opening up books and looking at philosophers and things like that. War. Here's a question to frame much of the current news and draw in a deeper philosophical and logic-based matter. The question is, what is self-defense? Does self-defense entail you or I forcing our neighbor to pay for our defense? I would say no, right? If one believes that that is the case, that self-defense means you or I can force our neighbor to pay for our defense, how is that not thus engaging in aggressive activity, therefore making the person doing that the aggressor? In other words, an enemy of each person's own ability to be able to be left alone, right? So if one has a claim on another person for self-defense, that means one is claiming aggressive action against someone else. Self-defense is precisely understood self-driven and individualistic. It can be nothing more, and it only becomes aggregated into larger groups defending the group when the individuals forming those groups all agree based on the exercise of each person's free will. Because if there's one person who doesn't want to be part of it and they don't leave them alone, they have become the aggressors very clearly. So let's see how both the United States and Israel, already statist entities that claim they are defending their own people while engaging in the very same crime that we mentioned above, how they claim so-called self-defense for their aggressor militaries that are engaging in criminal acts in other nations. First, the U.S. last night launched what the Trump administration termed self-defense strikes. Seriously, against the nation it has been attacking, blockading, and more. That would be against Iran. This time, Trump's goons attacked what they claim to have been mine-laying boats. Yes, here's the headline this is from MSN. U.S. military says it conducted self-defense strikes against targets in Iran. Isn't that just quaint? Here we go. The U.S. military struck targets in Iran. By the way, they killed at least 5 people because, they're just targets. This is like cardboard, I guess, in the eyes of the government. Yeah, near the Strait of Hormuz, not Lake Erie, not, Lake Champlain. No, the Strait of Hormuz. It's right there in Ohio, right? In what a spokesman for the military said Monday were acts of self-defense. Ta-da! Captain Tim Hawkins, R. Hawkins, a spokesman for U.S. CENTCOM, said the attacks were self-defense strikes. You know how that is. And they included missile launch sites. The strikes, Ewure, see how they wrote Ewure? It's E-W-R-E instead of were in Bandar Abbas in southern Iran, near the Strait of Hormuz, defense officials said. There was no announcement of any change in the temporary ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, which went into effect April 8th. So there you go. In fact, Trump even said, even though we just killed 5 people, essentially, it's still a ceasefire. You didn't see anything. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Jedi mind trick. How can they do that? I was talking with a young person earlier today, the daughter of somebody in the Free State Project. And she actually brought it up herself, and she echoed something that I wanted to discuss and something that Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul discussed on the Ron Paul Liberty Report today. We're going to show them in just a minute. This theme of, I wonder whether sometimes politicians engage in this so much that hopefully people don't become numb or intellectually acclimated to this to such an extent that their sensitivity is lessened when this sort of thing is done. When people use these terms like defense or the ceasefire is still on, it's still a ceasefire, when very clearly it's not. It's just incredible. And the insulting nature of it, it's such an insult to your own integrity as a person that it reflects greatly, I think, not only on those individuals who engage in that sort of lying activity, but on the mentality that supports statism itself. So this is incredible. So over at the news notes, you'll see the Trump gang continues to strike first and claim self-defense. Astoundingly, CENTCOM told reporters that this does not indicate ceasefire is over. Non-U.S. tied news sources report that U.S. drones were shot down by Iran in the region. So here's what Ryan Rosbiani writes. Iran's foreign ministry accuses U.S. of ceasefire violations in Hormuz. But, you know, the people who violated the ceasefire say that it wasn't a violation of the ceasefire and that the ceasefire still continues. So very clearly, it's not a violation of any ceasefire when they fire at all. And by the way, if you ever see a movie or anything where they got people like archers from medieval time, and they've got some, head leader of the guard saying, draw the string and fire, that's completely ahistorical. Fire comes from the burning of the gunpowder. That's fire. They didn't, obviously, it was draw and release for arrows, not fire. Fire! I think they did that in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner. I think they actually used that term fire. I can't remember. I'll have to find out. Iran's foreign ministry accuses the ceasefire violations by the U.S. in the 48 hours following Pakistan's active mediation efforts. The ministry says U.S. forces carried out multiple attacks of naval harassment against Iranian commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran cited Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter in formally condemning the incidents, holding Washington fully responsible for all consequences. The statement closes with a direct warning: Iran will not leave any aggression unanswered and will not retreat one step in defending its territory. Ceasefire or not, the strait is still an active pressure point. Now, I mentioned before that about 30% of the traffic that normally goes through the strait is going through the strait right now. And that's mostly going through because of the Iranians and their deal to say, we will provide you with services for the fee. So it's not a toll. They're saying, we'll give you passage and services, and you can pay us for the services. So that way they're skirting the UN law of the waters. But other places do the same sort of thing in their straits as well. As we saw last night, people discussed that as, I think it was Mario Nawfal was discussing that. But here's the foreign minister spokesman, Bagheri of Iran, said divisions inside America's created an opening for Israel to exert influence directly inside U.S. decision-making with destructive interventions aimed at sabotaging the negotiations. And we'll see how they, of course, in Israel are trying to sabotage the negotiations by, of course, expanding the attacks into Lebanon like some mushroom cloud. So you can see, as he says here, just read this off here real quick. There's no doubt that decision-making in the United States is in turmoil. You are facing a wave of resignations, dismissals, contradictory comments. This is real. Congressional opposition. Yep. I don't see any, as well as public opinions, opposition to the performance of the U.S. government. This situation has paved the way for the influence of some foreign parties, Israel, including the Zionist regime, to have destructive interference in the decision-making process. Absolutely right. But as long as they get the money, they look at it as not destructive to their bottom lines, right? Just ask Lindsey Graham. He loves his bottom line getting padded. Absolutely right. So yes, after the strikes near Bandar Abbas, we saw Iran responded rhetorically, and they claim that they have any right they want to, and I believe that they are correct on their international front, to respond militarily if they want to. Now, John Mearsheimer kind of explained it pretty well. We played a clip from the Monk debate last night, and he pretty much told the people there, the U.S. has lost what it started. The Resonance has this, and John Mearsheimer spelled it out pretty clearly. It's pretty easy to understand, right?
The United States has lost this war. It can't figure out how to solve this war, and it's going to have enormously negative consequences for all of you. You should understand that. We are in deep trouble in Iran. And this is what happens when you go around the world slaying monsters.
That's right. But of course, Victoria Nuland and Mike War Crime Pompeo, they don't care. They don't care. Their whole careers, both of those people, their whole careers have been off of the backs of taxpayers. And not only through that form of corruption, but then the devious use of that taxpayer money to fund revolutions, assassinations, handing out cookies to revolutionaries on the streets, and making deals with Nazis. I swear, I would have loved it if John Mearsheimer just laid a couple handcuffs down, a couple pairs of handcuffs down, and just had them sitting there. Just, while they're talking, they could be like, what are those doing there? And he'd be like, how's it going? You want some jewelry? Hey, what's up? Oh, man. So, okay. While we have the opportunity, let's talk about this manipulation of the language and the term self-defense, because Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams did a great job covering this. Here we go.
Netanyahu announced Israel would intensify its attacks on the country as Iran maintains that a real ceasefire in Lebanon is needed for a deal with the U.S. Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu announced on Monday that he ordered the Israeli military to intensify its attacks on Lebanon. No, are they fighting an army? No, they're blowing up cities. They're blowing up villages. They're blowing up children, just as they did in Gaza. Netanyahu said, I've ordered an even greater acceleration of our operations. It's true they are attacking us with drones, including fiber optic drones, but we have teams working on countermeasures. So the whole thing, if you think about it, Dr. Paul, where are Israelis being attacked? They're being attacked inside Lebanon, right? So by definition, it's a defensive war on the part of Hezbollah, whoever is fighting them. They have invaded another country. And then when that other country fights back, they say, this is outrageous. We're going to kill even more of you. And that's what we're seeing in Lebanon now.
Is there any chance that they play a good cop, bad cop routine? Because we hear the good promotions. Well, we're going to have an agreement, a ceasefire. It'll take a week or so. That's where it started now. I think it's been a month or so already. And this is the way the other thing started. I remember so well the minor little incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, went on for 10 years, millions of lives killed. So that, but I think our side tends to say, well, we're for peace. We're the peacemakers. We want to go over there and get to the bad guys. And the people who are more aggressive, because it's always in defense, is Israel. They have to defend themselves. And you've made the point already. Well, why is all the war going on in an invasion of Lebanon? It makes no sense whatsoever. But
now I want to pause there because there was a comment from Front Porch Media over at Rumble, and I want to show this comment. Great comments all over the place, but there was one in particular from Front Porch Media who mentioned how they changed it to, of course, war. And Smuhosky says, sorry, Guard, Orwellian double speak everywhere. Absolutely. And what is amazing about that is the fact that so many MAGA people have been able to mix this. It becomes a feedback loop where the idea is sold to them that by engaging in this very clear aggression, it's not aggression, it's defense. And they ramp it up to make it sound as if they're defending America even more by changing the name to the Department of War, using terms like ultimate lethality and destructive capacity, all to the service of your defense. It's incredible how they get people so bound up in the war mentality, the war mind, that they literally can change the name of the Defense Department, which hasn't been engaged in defense since literally World War II. And that itself was a lie hop, as letters between FDR and Churchill exposed. FDR was working to get the U.S. in there, to find some pretext to get the U.S. in there. But regardless of that, at least they declared war according to their Constitution. In every other instance, it hasn't been a declared war, and it's very clearly not even been close to defense in any way at all. Not at all. And yet now they're changing the term to Department of War to make it sound like they're steroided up for our defense. It's like, how perverse can you possibly get? And your comment over there, Front Porch, just brought it up perfectly. They're absolutely nuts. And the MAGA people are even worse because they're buying into it. Like, it's kind of strange to actually say, you know what? I can see that the perverse minds who are manipulating and using the language have clearer heads than the MAGA people who are fed this stuff and accept it. It's like the devious, evil people are less deluded than the MAGA people who hear what the evil people feed them and lap it up like dogs. I hope that adds something to your comment, Front Porch, because, and there's so many other great ones. Smuhosky, SMU is just right on the money. United States needs to mind their own business, says Birdhouse Blues. Right on, man. Absolutely. Jeez. So many crazy things going on. I want to go back to Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams hitting this theme once more. Here we go over at Rumble.
Oh, well, and then they'll always turn that into defense. That's a whole thing. And we'll talk about that in a bit, that everything is defensive, and it's nothing more than, lies on all this stuff that they say, well, we have to defend ourselves. And some people are just, cheering on one side, and they say they want to hear that, and they want to believe it, and to the point where they actually do believe it. And many of them get converted and say, well, this is the right thing to do because we've been told, these are very bad people. So we have to make that exception to this. And, one of the silly things on this debate that goes on, I can't imagine, several years ago, when we were involved way long ago with Iran, and we confiscated and froze up a lot of money.
Yeah.
And when I think Biden returned some of it, and he was castigated for returning stolen goods.
Their own money, yeah.
So, and that's the way it is now. There's still a lot of money held in there, and the people now have the audacity to say that we have to we can't negotiate with you, the Iranians. Why don't you give us our money back that you stole? Yeah. But they won't even recognize that at all. So it is, I think the level of debate and the seriousness of the debate, every day it gets less credible.
Yeah.
And and that was a predictable, outcome, just because of the way these things go.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that Israel is so audacious in the way they attack other countries that it's almost become normalized. You see them, and I have a video later of them. They wire every house in a village, and then they blow them all up at the same time. And people just accept that. It's terrible that it normalizes a kind of behavior that if any other country on earth did it, people would be outraged. If Russia was blowing up Ukrainian villages like this and killing all the people in the village, you can imagine the outrage that we would have. So it's just normalizing this. Now go to this next clip. After a Lebanon ceasefire was announced last month, President Trump declared that Israel was prohibited from further strikes on the country, but the Israeli attacks continued. Trump prohibits Israel from attacking Lebanon, and Israel says, we don't care. We're doing it anyway. Now go to the next one. Here is Trump's Truth Social post at the time. This was back on April 17th. This is what Trump said. The USA will get all the nuclear dust created by our great B-2 bombers. No money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. The deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either, but the USA will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Now, here's the important point. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. Thank you, President DJT. Now, Netanyahu must have looked at this and laughed his rear end off.
It's some of that. If you took this and you could say, well, this is a good statement. I mean, it'd be foolish for you to believe that they're being honest with us.
Yeah.
They're just making talk. It's just a talk back and forth, and it has an effect because people just get worn out back and forth, and nobody marched into New York. Oh yeah, they snuck into New York in a few places, but it's something that people just put up with this, and I can understand why the average person would feel helpless.
So I'll pause it there. One of the things, I don't know if you get the same feeling as I do, but one of the things that happens to me when I see this sort of back and forth behavior is, that the resolution of the issue is not something you're immediately going to see. And so I tend to just observe their character as, again, the turpentine is poured on the paint of their character, and it's eroding even more. And I just keep thinking, at what point can you get to the zenith of clownish behavior? Where does the apex of this occur? And it just seems like they one up themselves all the time. They constantly do it. But as that happens, as all these clown colors are thrown out, I do think that it is valuable to recognize that this is something that is perennial, and you can drill down deeper to the root of the issue, which is philosophical, and which comes with it, which carries with it the baggage of the state itself, the very concept that the state is there to defend you. Well, all that means is it's a bunch of people claiming in an aggressive way that your resources and your time and your interests will be redirected towards what they define for you is your defense, which is absurd. The whole thing is just stop laughably absurd. It's so dumb. Hands down, the game is over, right? So, number one answer on the board, absurd. Manson family gets to play. Corleone family, you're going to have to wait. So while we go into that story about the Israelis attacking more, and we talk about the United States attacking Iran, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Lebanon and look at some of the latest breaking news. As we mentioned, John Mearsheimer explained in the Monk debate in Toronto that the U.S. has lost against Iran, but don't you talk about the war crimes of the U.S. or Israel. These guys here will accuse you of being unpatriotic and, you got it, anti-Semitic, antiseptic, of course. You got it. So you'll see my response to this first, which is going to be coloring the thing and prejudice, but I can't avoid it. I'm going to put it up here first because that's the sequence of this. I could have put the link in for these guys and done this, but here is what I wrote. Blaming the Jews. They're saying here that we're seeing more and more people blaming the Jews. For what? I said, does he mean properly citing the occupation state for its genocide, ethnic cleansing, lobbying in D.C. to get our tax cash, kidnapping, torture, and rape in prisons, lying, spying, and sundry other things that have everything to do with state policies and not to do with religion or heritage? Talk about a fake argument, utterly inapplicable, but typical of those who don't like to face the facts that they themselves bring about through their malfeasance, through their breaches of their Constitution and arrogation of my rights. So here's Tim Burchett. He's demanding that Christians in America reject anti-Semitism, saying it goes against their faith since Jesus was Jewish. He says too many people are unfairly blaming Jewish communities. See, there you go. Blaming the Jews, using the same kind of rhetoric Hitler used, and points out that Jews make really good friends when they pat our campaign pockets.
The reality is hate sells, and these folks are just out here preaching this garbage, and we got to call it out. I'm critical of Israel a lot of times. I'm critical of Jared as he is of me, right. but it's just ridiculous. And now we've come to this place in society where both parties, somehow it's acceptable to call out Jews. They're less than 2% of our dadgum population. This is the card Hitler played. Oh, we're in trouble economically. Let's blame it on the Jews. Let's blame it on somebody. I'm sick of that crap, and we better stand up, and the Christian community better stand up, because I think this is something that goes at the heart of our beliefs. And I'm always quick to remind people that Jesus was a Jew. So what side are you going to be on? And I'm dead set against this kind of garbage, and we've got to call it out everywhere. And thank y'all for bringing this to people's attention.
Oh, most.
I was on a national podcast yesterday, and the guy said to me, he said, but don't you think the Jews have too much control in Washington? And I'm like, what the heck are you talking about, dude? I'm on foreign affairs. I meet with foreign countries every day, almost, the countries you can't even find on a dadgum map, and I rarely ever hear from any of my Jewish constituents.
His Jewish constituents are in Israel. His Jewish constituents are affiliated with AIPAC. And to think that he says that people are just errantly blaming the Jews for America's bad economic situation. Very clearly, he doesn't seem to recall that people weren't blaming the Jews when Joe Biden was in office, destroying the economy, that when they look at fractional reserve banking, they're not blaming Jews for that. And also, they're validly blaming the United States engaging in direct unconstitutional attacks on Iran because of the driving force of Israel. And Marco Rubio himself said that this ridiculous billions of dollars a day attack on Iran, this quixotic attack that is holding up energy and destroying the world's economy, was brought about because the United States administration said that if Israel attacked Iran and Iran responded, the United States would need to defend Israel somehow. So in defense, the United States engaged in an act of aggression against Iran. They said it themselves. Marco Rubio stood in the basement of the Capitol at the base of the stairs. I used to walk down those stairs all the time when I was in Washington. I know exactly where he was standing. You saw the video numerous times here and other places, I'm sure. Is he going to refute? Is Burchett going to refute what Rubio said? Did the reporter remember that the administration themselves said they were acting on behalf of Israel? No, of course he didn't, because he's from Fox. I wonder if CNN would do that. This is one of the most blatantly stupid things that I think I've ever heard a congressman say on television, and one of the worst examples of journalistic malfeasance. Literally, the guy is there throwing out brickbats, saying that if anybody should happen to bring up the fact that this is unconstitutional, that Israel is engaged in genocide in Gaza, defending the people there, well, then you must be supportive of Hamas to draw this argument out, right? Except they don't tell you, of course, that Israel was insistent on giving money to Hamas, and so was the United States, to the tunes of millions of dollars every week. And they've got the gall to tell you you can't be critical of their policies and cite them for the very things that they brought up themselves as their justifications. Oh, man. Wow, what a spit in the face. Hey, Mr. Burchett, anybody knows Mr. Burchett, have him give me a call. That would be fun to have him on the show. Hey, Mr. Burchett, you're going to have a great time here. You'll be having fun. And all the people in our audience, you should contact them too, because they will eat you alive. Wow. What a scumbag. Meanwhile, Israel has launched Operation Arrows on Fire into Lebanon. But don't blame Israel. An escalation, in another country with the defense group called Hezbollah. And Ryan Rosbiani has Operation Arrows on Fire is Netanyahu's way of killing the Iran deal. A full ceasefire in Lebanon is one of Iran's red line demands in ongoing MOU negotiations, Memorandum of Understanding, with the U.S., and Netanyahu wants to kill the deal. Tonight, Netanyahu struck 70-plus sites across Lebanon and ordered what? He ordered some fries for Donald Trump from McDonald's. No, not quite. I'm just joking around. That's right. Let's see. And ordered evacuations across Beirut's southern suburbs. Because, it's Beirut in another country. So, he's ordering them. And it's not as if Lebanon started this. It's the placement of the nation state of Israel that kind of kicked it all off in 1947. He announced 600 plus fighters eliminated in recent weeks. That would be fighters and babies and other people killed, and told his military to intensify, not pause. Now, the curious thing about this is this comes on the tail of course, Ben-Gvir already saying that they're going to take more land. And we'll give you that information in just a minute, because that has nothing to do with defense. It's all about the Greater Israel Project. Reports cite Israeli calls for evacuations in Beirut, while schools in northern Israel have been closed until further notice. 5 more people were murdered by Israel in the past few hours, by the way. And I wonder is it okay, Mr. Burchett, to mention this? I don't know, because I'd hate to blame Israel for, this. Lebanese civil defense teams are still searching beneath collapsed buildings for others trapped under the rubble. Jabir shared videos of paramedics trying to resuscitate a critically wounded child as entire homes around him were reduced to rubble. Rescue workers dug through shattered concrete in the dark. I don't know whether the child survived. Maybe somebody can ask Tim Burchett. Yeah. And, of course, Israel is bombing a key Lebanese reservoir. That would be another war crime. 100% war crime. Not watered down. Wink, wink. Yeah, Sarah's got this. They just bombed the Qaran Dam in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. It is a key, the essential water reservoir serving civilian populations across surrounding villages. Yeah, that is not, as she says, a battlefield target. It is a critical water infrastructure. It is an act of genocide. It is a war crime. Unbelievable. And yeah, more about Iran. Iran has demanded that Israel withdraw from Lebanon as part of any peace deal. But Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu flatly said over the weekend that they will not. We are not taking our foot off the gas. On the contrary, I've said to step on the gas even harder, he said in a video message. As we know, Israel does not want a peace with Iran, and the Israeli government wants that land called Lebanon. Now, here's Mr. Ben-Gvir, and he's not the lovable bear Ben from Grizzly Adams. Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, says that sometimes he's got a hyphen between the Ben and the Gvir, and he gets compliments on the hyphen. Itamar Ben-Gvir says Israel will not allow Trump to have this deal with Iran because it is bad for Israel. Quote, as the government of Israel cannot allow this to happen, this is a bad agreement. This is an agreement that can harm the state of Israel, and we will not allow this to happen. You mean peace? Of course not, because you are an aggressor state. You exist like all other states through aggression, and you spread against other states and take them over. Yesterday, he also called for more escalation with Lebanon. And of course, he's calling for the taking of land north of the Litani River. We'll give you that information in a minute. So there he is. Do you think that a bad agreement for Israel, like the one that Trump is likely to bring against Iran, will be that Israel will be harmed? First of all, there's something called the real thing, which is human life. A bad agreement for the state of Israel can harm human life. See, I guess he's got sort of dual personalities because he has no problem torturing human lives when they are trying to bring food for human lives on a flotilla, a peaceful flotilla in international waters, where human people agreed in their government capacities to certain rules that he flouts every day. Yes, of course. He takes those rules and he uses them like toilet paper. Now Netanyahu is ramping up while President Trump offers deflection. Israel, says Sarah, just carried out a horrific massacre in Marrakech, South Lebanon, dropping bombs on residential buildings. Children are being pulled from under the rubble of their own homes. Entire families wiped out. Yes, the scenes are devastating, as she notes. Indeed, they are. So let's see. But remember, it's all about people, says Ben-Gvir. It's all about people. You know, like some of the people buried under that rubble that they can't rescue. Some of those people, I guess they're not people. In fact, as we know, they don't consider non-Jews people. They're not people. It's only about Jews. That's Ben-Gvir's message, if you didn't get it. See, I learned that pretty quick when I was at BU, because the Jewish American princesses would describe Lebanese people and Palestinian people as animals or insects. They are not Jewish, according to them. Therefore, they're not people. And that's what Ben-Gvir is saying. Here is how the BBC colors aggression. BBC, here's a comparison of BBC's terms. Russia threatens more Kiev strikes and tells foreign nations to leave. Meanwhile, Netanyahu says Israel will intensify strikes against Hezbollah. See the difference? Yes, nothing like bombing a sovereign state like Lebanon, but, you know, they're just strikes. Now, this is happening there tonight, right now. The Israeli army has issued new forced displacement orders for 27 towns and villages across southern Lebanon late Tuesday, just before 10 p.m. local time. Families were forced to wake children, evacuate elderly and disabled relatives, and leave behind everything. And yes, that is north of the Litani River. Let me give you some of the information on this. But again, a quick reminder, what is defense? Well, of course, defense is the United States going over here to kill people over here. That's what defense is. See, and if you're just listening in audio, I'm showing a map of the world and the United States with a big red arrow leaving from somewhere near the coast of South Carolina and heading on over to the Strait of Hormuz. But let's continue some of this stuff, because you heard Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams talking about some of the facets of the Iran deal, the JCPOA, that were used by MAGA people to criticize Obama when he handed back some money that is owed to Iran? Well, here's a little bit more, and then we're going to go into a little on the maps when it comes to the takeover of land of Gaza. So first, just let me give you this. Trump said on Monday that negotiations with Iran were, quote, proceeding nicely, but then said that Iran would have to hand all nuclear material over to the U.S. as a condition of the deal, which, of course, is something the Iranians want to avoid so that they can continue maintaining and expanding their nuclear electric power capacity. And, of course, the Iranian government has said that all nuke talks are off the table until at least 60 days after all other points are negotiated and agreed. Meanwhile, the Trumpers who launched those attacks last night claimed they acted in, you got it, self-defense. And there's the gaslighting of self-defense. See? It's just perfect. That's awesome. So here is a key exchange between Judge Napolitano and Larry Johnson, as Larry reiterates the fact that the JCPOA agreement to return billions to Iran was about Iranian money that the U.S. stole and froze in foreign banks, just like Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul mentioned. And Larry and the judge studied the repulsive statements of Ben-Gvir about expanding into Lebanon.
Unfreeze frozen assets. That's number one. And, people need to understand a lot of those frozen assets came from weapons purchases that the Shah made in his last year that was owed to Iran. And then when the Islamic Republic was established, the United States refused to fulfill the deal, but they kept the money. Okay?
Those frozen assets go that far back?
Oh, yeah. Iran was Saudi Arabia before Saudi Arabia was Saudi Arabia. By that, I mean the major purchaser of U.S. weaponry, billions of dollars. So, I've used the example. It's like, you give me $250,000 for a Lamborghini, and then I don't like your politics. And I say, well, I'm not giving you the Lamborghini, but I'm keeping your $250,000. That's where a large portion of these frozen assets came from. So you got the frozen assets. Second is immediate sanction relief. The United States keeps talking about, we'll see if you comply with the agreement. Iran's been down that road before with the JCPOA. They signed on. They keep being told that was such a terrible deal. That is a lie. It's just a blatant lie by Trump and those around him. People should go back and read that agreement. It was very detailed, very precise, and in fact, pretty onerous as far as it was the requirements levied upon Iran. But then they were promised sanction relief, which never came. So Iran's saying, no, we're not, giving you a hamburger today for promises you're going to pay on Tuesday or next Wednesday. No. We want it now.
Thank you, Wimpy. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the third element that's non-negotiable is the war's got to stop in Lebanon. Israel has got to stop. The United States has got to put the brakes on. The United States has that power. The United States refuses. And as we've seen throughout this so-called ceasefire that's now completely bankrupt, that the United States refuses to exercise the leverage over Israel that it has. And then the fourth element is Iran's going to continue to charge, let's call them resort fees or user fees, environmental fees. They're not going to charge a toll, but any ship that's going to pass through the Strait of Hormuz is going to pay money to Iran. It's going to be paid in either the Iranian currency or Chinese yuan.
Right.
And the point of all that is those four basic conditions for Iran. The United States is not going to accept those because the Zionists will not let Trump accept those.
Here's the arch Zionist, Ben-Gvir. They're not going to stop in Lebanon if it's up to him. Cut number 6.
Sirens for manned aircraft, explosive drones. We must not accept this reality. We must not normalize it. We already know how it ends when they tolerate and adapt to a routine of terror. Not this time. This madness must stop. I call on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You must reach out to Donald Trump immediately, go to him directly, and lay every single one of our concerns out clearly on the table. Make it perfectly clear that the state of Israel is not willing, absolutely not willing to accept. And we refuse to tolerate this any longer. We are not willing to continue these endless campaigns. Our ultimate goal is to achieve a decisive and final victory in every one of them. We need to cut the electricity in Lebanon.
My goal, of course, is greater Israel.
Gee, was he just talking about a final solution? Sounded like it.
Wow.
And I mean, that kind of language out of him is disgusting.
Yes.
And it underscores that, Trump is the daddy here. They go to daddy. And then Trump has it in his power to stop this, but instead he continues to enable it.
Well, Larry, we've played this for you. When Trump says Netanyahu will do whatever I want him to, he really has that in reverse.
Yeah. Right now, it's as I wrote over the weekend, there are I can give you 250 million reasons why, and that refers to the amount of money that Miriam Adelson allegedly gave to the Trump campaign. But it's not just Adelson. It's Paul Singer. There's a whole collection of Jewish billionaires that are ultra Zionists that are levying their pressure on Trump. And we saw just when the word started over the weekend that there was the possibility of a deal congealing coming into place. Boy, social media just exploded. Trump was getting savaged and hit from all sides. The Lindsey Grahams, the Ted Cruzes, for starters. But, so it's just a reminder coming on the heels of the defeat of Thomas Massie in Kentucky by a Zionist lobby, that, if Russia exercised this kind of influence over the U.S. political system and over U.S. political leaders, we would have started World War III. Instead, America is just pliant. They go along with it. They accept it. And people, like me and others who will speak out against it are attacked.
Here's Joe Kent reinforcing his own reasons for resigning. It almost sounds like it's a Ray McGovern gathering, a rage against the war event on Memorial Day yesterday. Chris, cut number 5.
So I made a promise to myself in my 20s that I never knew I'd actually have to cash it at some point. I promised myself if I was ever in a position to prevent young men and young women from going into a needless war, that I would speak out, but I would do something. Fast forward 20 plus years, I found myself in that position. I found myself in President Trump's administration, was honored to be there, was leading the National Counterterrorism Center. It was a job I felt was very important because we do have real terrorist threats that have only gotten worse because of this war. But I wanted to actually help President Trump deliver on his campaign promises. And watching a foreign government, watching the Israelis march right in and basically dictate terms to us and manipulate American intelligence, manipulate the media, manipulate those around President Trump to put us into this war. I knew that I had to leave. I knew I had to start speaking out because I couldn't.
I'll just pause it there, everybody. Wouldn't it be interesting to be able to chat with Joe Kent and, ask him some questions about what was going through his mind while he was experiencing things when he was first approached to join the Trump administration, why he stayed and what went through his mind when the Trump administration was clearly engaging in acts of criminal activity and war crimes and extrajudicial murder while he was still there. And the same thing with Tulsi Gabbard. I brought it up before. It would be interesting to get into a sincere conversation with somebody who is offering some really good insights right now, but could have offered those insights a while ago. So let me talk to you a little bit in our next segment about Gaza, but I want to turn to the rumblers out there and get your thoughts, everybody. Feel free to drop your comments, links, everything. Let me just check in the comments section to make sure that I'm not missing anything in the comments section. And yes, once more, we've got a great comment from Front Porch Media that's came up right into my eyes first. Board of Peace has spoken. Yes, the great and powerful Oz. Yes, indeed. And Birdhouse says, Ron is still sharp as a tack for 91. Yeah, absolutely. And let's see. Birdhouse says, or when the Scorpions play, when the smoke is going down. I remember the Scorpions I haven't listened to them in so long. I was never really super into the Scorpions, but I did appreciate their music. Let's see. We got Skunk Hollow says, I bet Trump's PR offers an AI assessment of Trump's health, not a real clinical assessment. That's right. He is going to get checked out for his health, right? Like it matters. Like his health matters. It's like, well, gee, we better make sure Donald Trump's in good health. Otherwise, he might do something crazy. He might break the Constitution. He could be a dangerous guy if he's not healthy. We better check him out. Like you need that to confirm a problem, right? Boy, good thing they're checking him out because we got to know whether or not he's a problem. I couldn't figure it out myself. Thanks, Doc. Where's Anthony Fauci? Can he do a PCR test on Trump's mental stability? I did the PCR test. We found one functional brain cell. We expanded it and cycled it up. He's perfectly fine. Wear your mask. It'll protect you against the tyranny. 6 foot distancing from tyranny. You're fine. No problem. It's all for your self-defense. Oh, man. It is. It's like this idea of the experiment in self-governance. If you're not left alone, it's not self-governance. If there's a polis telling you, pay us, that's not self-governance, Brick. Oh, man. All right. Rocking it back to, you got it, my friends, back to a little bit of more Motown action with Gaza. Yes, it is a ceasefire, right? Oh, no, that's right. Steve Hankey's got this covered with reality. Thank you, Steve. Gaza's health ministry reports that 6 Palestinians have been killed in the past 24 hours by Israeli forces. 906 Palestinians have been killed since the beginning of the ceasefire. See? Right? Fire. Da-da-da. A ceasefire's fire. Da-da-da. Israel breaks ceasefires again. And yes, you will see on the screen them pulling a dead body out of the burning, smoldering remains of a vehicle. So, yeah. In the middle of the street. There you go. Unbelievable. All right, there you go. Sorry, I played it once and I was feeling that, oh, you got to show the body. I'm like, wait a minute, So I was going to try to pause it before the poor man's dead body showed up, but I didn't click it off in time. Sorry about that. But anyway, I don't want it to become prurient or, some sort of weird, perverse curiosity or anything like that. And this Palestinian photojournalist Fadid al-Magari was killed in an Israeli airstrike because, he was in a refugee camp along with other people in a tent because that's what they did last night. They hit a tent because that was really cool. Now, let's talk about the Israeli maximalist land grabs and their military control. This ex-post from Al Jazeera links to a very valuable piece. As you'll see here, findings show Israel's military holds 1,000 square kilometers of Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria under direct military rule since October 7th, 2023. And you'll see we've got more information on Syria as well. As you'll see, yes, they are moving to establish their permanent residency on the land that they took over the past year inside southwestern Syria. So here's this report. We look at how Israel's occupation of these lands extends beyond what maps show. So you can see here, the area that Ben-Gvir wants is in the Nabataya region, going up towards the Zarani River. That is north of the Litani River, which, of course, is north of Israel. So they are they're destroying all sorts of villages and houses all throughout this area, from Bin Jebel to Tyre. They blasted that apart. That's one of the most ancient cities, filled with tons and tons of thousands of years old historical markers. They attacked that. And of course, here is the Israeli occupied Golan Heights and Syria. They've established new lands that they've taken in Syria. And over in this area, you'll see right over here, they are moving, you got it, more, I'll show you in a minute, more of those armored bulldozers. But let me show you this Al Jazeera news site. Israel's occupation of Gaza, Lebanon, Syria extends beyond what maps show. Findings show Israel holds 1,000 square kilometers of Gaza, Lebanon, Syria under direct military rule. But there's even more. After every ceasefire agreement, a map has emerged, and after every map, questions on the ground arise. Where do the forces actually stand? Do the field markers, demolition operations, and military positions match what is declared on paper? So, of course, they go down, they take the land, and then, of course, they plunk themselves down in areas beyond even those areas that they claim to have taken. The digital investigations team at Al Jazeera's open source unit tracked 3 areas where new borders for the Israeli military presence have taken shape: the Gaza Strip, southern Lebanon, and southern Syria. In Gaza, we looked at the so-called yellow line, which appeared on the ceasefire agreement maps as the limit of Israeli control within the strip, designated by yellow concrete markers on the ground, which of course they moved. In southern Lebanon, the investigation looked at the military zone declared by Israel following a subsequent ceasefire agreement with that country, before examining what satellite imagery shows as the actual situation in impacted villages and towns. Hate it when they use that term, impacted, that way. As for southern Syria, where no similar official Israeli map exists, we looked at fixed military outposts beyond the so-called Alpha line that separates the occupied Golan Heights from the rest of Syria. Don't forget, al-Jilani, was now known as al-Shara, was named al-Jilani because he was born in Syria in the Golan Heights, which is now no longer Syria. It's Israel. Unbelievable. Since each area provides a different type of evidence, the investigation combined official maps published by the Israeli military, satellite imagery captured by the ceasefire agreements, spatial calculations using geographic information systems, and data from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. In Gaza, the story begins with a line drawn by the Israeli army on its maps following the ceasefire agreement of October 10th, which never happened in a ceasefire at all, known as the Yellow Line. It was presented as the boundary separating Israeli military control zones with Gaza, covering an area estimated at about 200 square kilometers, 77 square miles, according to Israeli maps. However, when Al Jazeera's team tried to trace the reality on the ground, a gap emerged between what was declared on the maps and what the imaginary and field data revealed. The investigation relied on satellite imagery and geolocation of the yellow concrete blocks placed by the Israeli military up to early February 2026. You ever had a neighbor where there's actually a post for the property line and they keep moving it every couple of years into your property? The analysis showed that these markers did not always stop at the boundary of the official military line established on the Israeli maps. Rather, they exceeded it in several areas, sometimes by hundreds of meters, which they would then, of course, utilize to shoot people. And I think you get the gist. They're doing the same thing in Syria. They're doing the same thing in Lebanon. Of course they are. And the West Bank, too. Now, here's what Ahmed Shihab Eldon reports on X. Israel's Channel 12 reports Israeli forces have crossed the Yellow Line in Lebanon, the ceasefire boundary that until now marked the outer limit of Israeli ground presence since 2006. That would be Israeli ground presence in Lebanon, north of the Israeli border, where they're not supposed to be because it's a different country. But the Lebanese government allows them there, which the Israelis then use as a pretext to claim that if Hezbollah at all wants to try to get them out, then that therefore is aggression against the Israelis, which are occupying that yellow region. How is that not perverse? To describe people trying to get them off their land as aggression. I don't get it. And you can see right there. So this is the area they want to take, basically between this point and the rest of the Litani River that goes horizontal. But they also are claiming now they're going to go north of the Litani River. That's what Ben-Gvir wants. Then we got this, and you'll see the bulldozers. Israel recently conducted threatening exercises on the Jordanian border. Yes, that's right. Here's the Jerusalem Post. IDF tests readiness for surprise attack on eastern border. Anybody tell you about that on NBC or CNN or Fox? Well, look at that. The IDF held a major Dead Sea drill simulating a surprise attack along the eastern border, including infiltrations, drone threats, and civilian area incidents. That would be the border with a real country called Jordan, not the fake Zionist-created state of Israel. Yeah. Friday, May 15th, IDF conducted an exercise near the Dead Sea in the Jordan Valley. The IDF said the chief of the general staff exercise was held to assess the IDF's readiness for a surprise attack scenario along the eastern border in the areas of the 96th and 80th divisions. And of course, they used a lot of American-made munitions, which made the military-industrial complex a lot more money. And of course, let's not forget, we'll get to the bulldozers in a minute, that the Israelis are trying to, of course, suppress watchdogs again. And as you can see here, Francesca Albanese, yep, the Trump administration is reinstating sanctions against her specifically. Now, I didn't know that that was possible. Did you know that the United States could force her to no longer be able to use any banks, not even come to the United States? Did you know that? Is that in the Constitution? Did she have a trial? No, the things that are in the Constitution are, if you are accused of doing something bad, they've got to cite you for breaching some code, which they have not for her. And then you're supposed to be given a trial according to the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. And then once you're found guilty, you're not supposed to be harshly punished based on the 8th and the 14th Amendments. They haven't done any of that for her. Not at all. A 3-judge panel in the D.C. Circuit Court just issued an administrative stay allowing the Trump administration to do this because, of course, the D.C. panel doesn't care about the Constitution. They're punishing her. Judge Richard Leon had correctly blocked the sanctions, recognizing that, well, how about the term sanction isn't in the Constitution? No, he didn't do that. He didn't go that far to actually read it, but he recognized that Albanese's First Amendment rights are protected because she owns property in the U.S. and her daughter is an American citizen. It doesn't even matter because there's not supposed to be any statute. It doesn't matter whether she's American or not. If she came from Mars and she wanted to speak about something in the United States, Congress shall write no law abridging the freedom of speech, not abridging the freedom of American speech. Duh. The Justice Department is arguing that foreign nationals abroad have no constitutional rights, a dangerous precedent that would gut free speech protections globally. And wait till you see, again, as I've told people before, as I told Jeff Kohner, if you think that foreigners don't have the right to free speech, then what happens if other people in other countries also think that you don't have natural rights when you travel there? It's possible that many of those states wouldn't recognize those things. Many countries don't protect freedom of speech and things like that. But what happens if you go to a country that supposedly has a constitution that does protect free speech, but then they claim it only protects the people in their country? What are you going to do? What are you going to do if they throw you in a jail and they don't give you habeas? You're going to sit there like that man we discussed last week who's been in Guantanamo Bay for 20 years without a charge against him, without evidence presented. Yeah, the Justice Department argues that foreigners are not protected by the machine of the Constitution, which outlines, delineates, and describes every facet of what the U.S. government can do and reserves the rest to the states and the people. Supposedly, it was there to protect your natural rights, to defend your natural rights. But of course, it is not a machinery of defense. It is a machinery of offense, of aggression, because it is the polis. So it doesn't work. That's the answer. The polis doesn't work to protect your rights because it only exists by infringing on your rights. The Court of Appeals has scheduled key filings for May 28th and June 2nd. This isn't just about Francesca Albanese. It's about whether America will uphold free speech or become complicit in Israel's crimes through censorship and intimidation. Yeah. And she has not had an easy time of it at all. That's for darn sure. And by the way, there's more on the speech suppression side. French Judge Nicolas Goyou, who issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu at the ICC, says that Visa and MasterCard just blocked all his cards. That's right, leaving him unable to make purchases. He says judges, lawyers, and politicians are being intimidated and treated as criminals. Now, this is in Spanish.
J'ai découvert que la quasi-totalité des moyens de paiement, en fait, en France.
There you go. See, I know my foreign languages. Don't mess with me. I did the PCR test on that. It came up Spanish. I know how to do these things. You know that. Now, let me see if I can find that bulldozer footage going into Syria. And if I can't, I'll get it for you mañana. Let me see. Yeah, I'll have to. It's over my X feed. I'll see if I can find it before the end of the night. But now I want to describe one final thing, and this has to do with what we're moving up from the fifth story into the big warfare coverage story, and it has to do with Russia. This is a big deal. So let me give this to you because this is pretty massive. Russia, Ukraine, as we noted, Western media was invited to Luhansk to cover the site where 16 Western Ukrainian drones hit in 3 waves to kill 20 young people, many of them children. CNN and MSNBC didn't show. I don't think the BBC or Fox visited, but Che Bose of RT was there.
Paying for these drones, paying for these corrupt people in Kiev to kill people. It's terrorism. I mean, it's whatever you want to say. Look around here. There's a reason why they try to prevent people like me coming here. They try to prevent channels like RT. They try to stop us because they're desperate to prevent the truth about this kind of terrorism getting to the people in Europe. Because if the people in Europe knew what the money was being spent on in this so-called war, which was started by the Americans and the British, of course, we know that too. If they knew what the money was being spent on to kill children in their beds, people would come out on the streets and they would, they would tell these politicians. And it's interesting, in Europe, where I'm from, the most corrupt and unpopular politicians are the ones who are most dedicated to this religion of Zelensky and his Banderite Nazi friends who come and kill children in their beds.
Oh, yeah, so true. And the Banderite aspect of it is a pretty big deal. I want to give you a little more, but I want to thank MOE Studios and a number of others placing their great comments into the chat. We've got MOE, I think, said every time guard hits them over the head with their own rule book, it's music to my ears. Thank you, my friend. Big time. I am so with you on that because they're such hypocrites. And so many people get involved with politics and they frivolously, very lightly treat their oath. They just go with this feeling of puffery, of entering an American tradition, of coming from their locality and somehow becoming part of the American system and representing their area. They don't read the rules and they really get uncomfortable when you bring it up to them. And it's pretty easy. You can see how it makes them feel very, very tiny, very small. It's weird. It's absolutely weird, and it shakes them up like crazy. Unbelievable. Yeah. Let me see. This is Treasury Scott Bessent Soros' tool to sanction. Boy, absolutely right, Front Porch Media. So true. And the idea of economic warfare. Can you imagine literally sitting there going, I think it's a really good idea that, we make it super expensive for mothers to get baby formula or medicine for their kids. That's a great idea. It'll drive people out on the streets, which will be for the greater good. Have you ever thought how good it would be to see somebody like that get punched in the face repeatedly until they're unconscious on the ground? I haven't. Never. I've never thought that. No, not at all. Because they're devil worshippers, says Freetard. You got it, brother. Absolutely. Now let's get over to this. As we last night reported and discussed on Liberty Conspiracy, the Russian government, of course, responding to years of NATO expansion, struck Ukrainian military and intel sites after that Ukrainian attack that we just saw, after also warning American and other foreign governments and warning Ukrainian civilians to evacuate. Here's RT. Russia warns all foreign citizens to leave Kiev. Moscow has urged foreigners to leave the Ukrainian capital and warned residents to stay away from military, industrial, and government sites. Kiev's deadly attack on a college dorm in the Russian town of Starobisk last week was the last straw for Russia, and it will be conducting systematic strikes on assorted targets across the Ukrainian capital from now on, the foreign ministry in Moscow has announced. The ministry made the statement in Moscow a day after a large-scale retaliatory strike on Kiev, prompted by the drone strike on the college in the Lugansk People's Republic. The Ukrainian strike killed at least 21 people in their dormitory, mainly teenage girls. The Russian government, I noted here, is preparing more to finish the fight with greater speed and, of course, alacrity. Headline, this coming from RT. The next blow will be more painful. Russia experts are signaling something bigger than retaliation. And NewsGuard, there's the link. You don't need the Lancelot link. You got it. Russian strategic analysts describe a shift toward managed escalation against Kiev and discuss the broader risks to Europe. According to the foreign ministry, the Russian military will now systematically target defense industry facilities in Kiev. Moscow urged foreigners, including diplomats and representatives of international organizations, to leave the Ukrainian capital as soon as possible and advised civilians to stay away from defense industry facilities. Following the statement, the newspaper Kommersant asked Russian experts to assess the foreign ministry's message. The foreign ministry's statement regarding the targeted strike on an educational institution in Starobisk, which resulted in the death of students, highlighted that the cup of patience has overflowed. This means that the amount of suffering and anger that society and the state can put up with has reached a certain breaking point. In such a situation, transitioning to a strategy of managed escalation seems like a rational necessity. Now, let's go back over to the news notes. Going to close up that tab. And here is, of course, more. Senior MP reveals Russia's strategy for strikes on Kiev. This also coming from RT. The Russian military will begin targeting bunkers used by Ukrainian military commanders and leadership in response to Kiev's continued terrorist attacks on civilians. Senior MP Andrei Kartopolov says Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhyana Rada, and Vladimir Zelensky's office are not on the target list. In the wake of the deadly Ukrainian drone attack on the college in Lugansk People's Republic, Moscow announced a new strategy pledging to systematically hit assorted targets across the Ukrainian capital in retaliation. Now, to go back to the news notes, here is Andrei Martyanov telling RT how this Ukraine NATO attack has galvanized, as we said last week, the Russian population to move swiftly and end the Zelensky government.
And so they have this, as what Sergei Lavrov stated, the tip of the spear, with which obviously due to their incompetence and highly low, very low cultural level, they thought that they could defeat Russia militarily. So now they know they can't. So what you're going to do? You're going to go and do terrorist acts. Attack on Starobilsk and killing children, innocent children, is one of those things which, that's it. I mean, this is the tipping point, and Russia could have gone and do it in the more, moderate way, just killing primarily this essentially personnel of the whatever is remaining armed forces of Ukraine. Now this is over, and the essentially annihilation of this the whole terrorist infrastructure will start, including in Europe if it continues. And I'm pretty sure that if Europe, which I mean essentially lost the right to exist as it exists today, if they want to kill their diplomats, it's their problem. Russian society doesn't care.
One of the things that maybe you learned and I learned as well over time was that during tough times, cultures tend to really come together, especially on a local level. And the people in Russia suffered for 70 years under the Soviet regimes, suffered to some extent with forced movement to the gulags, to replacement of people in their homes, seizures of businesses, absolute deprivation for decades, right? That tends to bring localities together to help each other. And of course, obviously, the Soviets tried to get people to spy on each other and so on. But as things started to cool off and slowly but surely the Soviet system fell apart, the economic hardships were still there for quite a while. And it took a while for the areas to regroup. And that brought people together in a very strong cultural way. They already were very, very strong in the Orthodox Church, obviously. And when someone is fed internationally weapons to attack a culture like that, when Zelensky is seen as the puppet of internationalists killing local kids like that, that is explosive. That is so bad for the people who have just engaged in the attack. That is a total tactical error beyond the already manifest and deeper immorality of it. And they have just woken the bear, and that bear's not going to sleep. The intensity of this is going to be ratcheting up day by day. Unbelievable. Now, let me just remind you of some of the things that some people seem to think are just perfectly comparable to, seeing people die. Let's talk about that man right there, Mike Huckabee, and not forget what Mike Huckabee, you better remember. And I hope the Russians remember all the things that the Israelis have brought them too,
I wonder if everyone in Lebanon understands that if there were no Israel, they wouldn't have a cell phone. I wonder if they understand that every time they use a USB, every time they use car navigation, that every time they eat a cherry tomato or have a delicious bite of seedless watermelon, instead of saying, I can't talk to those people, they should step across the border, shake the hands and say, thank you.
Man, I'm telling you. Anybody remember the movie The Warriors? It was essentially, it's based on Greek mythology, and it's about this gang in New York where a lot of the different zones and regions are run by different gangs that have their turfs, right? And the Warriors are trying to make it back to their turf near, I think it's like Coney Island. And they have been wrongfully accused of killing the leader who was bringing all the gangs together to work in peace. Somebody shoots the guy, and they blame it on the Warriors. So the Warriors are trying to make it back, and it's an Odysseus Odyssey type of movie, which when it came out was criticized as being incredibly violent, and that it was reflective of America's youth and all these different things. Right nowadays, people see it as obviously a parallel to Greek mythology and Odysseus and things like that, and it's actually studied in film classes, and it's a terrific movie. And in the movie, one of the gangs is called the Baseball Furies, and they get dressed up in pinstripe outfits, sort of like the New York Mets, and wear baseball caps with white mime makeup, and they don't speak, and they carry baseball bats. And at a certain point, I think it's in Central Park, the members of the Warriors encounter some members of the Baseball Furies who are chasing them down. And then for some reason, none of these Warriors have like guns. They only have knives for some reason, except for the one person who shoots the leader guy at the beginning of the movie. And he's the one who says, "Can you dig it?" That's a line from that. And then, of course, Warriors come out and play, which I guess was done on the fly. But the Baseball Furies, there's actually a band called the Baseball Furies, and they get dressed up like those guys, actually. They do sing. They don't mime. But sometimes I see a guy like Mike Huckabee, and I just think, man, where are the Baseball Furies? Where are they? We need the Baseball Furies. You know what I'm saying? I'm just thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if they were hanging around there, you know, their pinstripes? Yeah, that'd be pretty good. Or maybe, you know, for a guy like him, Mark Levin, same thing, right? Yeah. Maybe.